Well, today I am absolutely thrilled to have my guest on, and it's DENHOLM SPURR, who is a fantastic actor, who I discovered very recently, actually. And he's been involved in lots of different roles. One in particular, which stood out for me, is as Joe in The Grass is Always Grindr. And he's also an amazing advocate for the LGBT community. And he's also directed too, I understand. So DENHOLM, welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into acting?
Sure. I don't come from a particularly acting family. I do come from a kind of creative, performative family. Like my dad was a drummer in the Boys Brigade. My grandma ran a tap dancing school. My mum was a singer and dancer in Pontins when she was younger. So there was definitely a performative kind of, what's it called, like rumblings in my family and inspiration from my family. But the acting side of it was not a thing. Actually, it was on recommendation from my grandma, because my grandma had been suffering with some mental health stuff. And she went and did this kind of Sunday acting therapy thing at a local theatre near me where I grew up called the Charles Cryer in Carshalton. And she said, well, I actually had a really wonderful time and I think that you would really enjoy this. Why don't you go? And so I went and had a look, and they did this. There wasn't drama therapy, but it was more of a kind of acting based thing. And I thought, oh, I'll try that out then and see what it's like. And I had the best time. And I was actually quite good at it naturally, which was at the time, I mean, I wasn't like, I was quite good at quite a few things actually, in terms of like academia, but in terms of something that was fulfilling in a physical, practical sense, I didn't think there were many things that I can't remember anything that I was particularly good at. I wasn't particularly good at any sports. I was a good swimmer, but that wasn't really a heavy thing in my school. So to have something practical that I could do that I enjoyed and I was quite good at was great. And so I really kind of took to it like a fish to water. And then off the back of that, joined a local amateur dramatic society called the Gypsy Players, which is just an incredible institution in terms of amateur theatre, because it's because it's in a really wealthy area. The theatre itself is a converted stable that's been funded by its members and legacy members, and it's as good, if not better, than lots of fringe venues in London. And there were people there that really cared about it, and they would do the scenes. They had a workshop to do the sets to make all the sets. So you could go and do any part of theatre you wanted. And that really gave me a kind of view into how theatres operate and a look at all the different facets of theatre, which I think actually later on, when I went more into directing and producing, has been really instrumental as well. So I was doing that, was still doing well at school, did my A-levels at Wilson's, and then did really well at that, and then got in to do drama and Spanish at Exeter University. And so they went off and kind of studied academically drama, but also extracurricularly. I think I was in something like 30 plays across the 3 years I was at university, just because I was so I cared about it so much and I really loved it. Most people, when they start university, especially if they do a drama course, they're like, oh, I want to be an actor. By the end of the first year, there's probably only a third left that still want to be an actor. And by the end of the third year, I was still kind of, yes, this is 100% what I want to do. Went off after drama school and got a scholarship to go to Oxford School of Drama and did a year's course there, and then graduated and then came into the business. So that's kind of the trajectory, cutting out lots of different bits, but the general trajectory of what led me into the business.
Yeah, and I mean, out of all of the things that you've done, the different productions and so on, what stands out for you particularly?
So one of my proudest moments, aside from The Grass Was Grinder, which is just incredible, and I'm so proud of that in so many ways,
So brilliant. If people haven't seen that, they need to go and watch it, because it is, I mean, obviously it's based on reality. It's a pretty gritty piece, and yeah, and quite emotional as well. A bit of an emotional roller coaster, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would recommend people go and look at that. But sorry, carry on.
So yeah, so Grassroots Grindr is fantastic, but I did lots of work, which we'll get onto more about later, I'm sure. That when I was homeless, I ended up joining a homeless theatre company, and that they were called Cardboard Citizens, and they're based actually near where I live now, in Whitechapel. And they did a show that was at the Barbican, which was the 50th anniversary of Ken Loach's Kathy Come Home.
Yeah.
And it was a stage adaptation of that film that was the kind of seminal film on exposing homelessness to the masses. And I played Reg, the lead male part in that. And that was just an amazing experience, because the Barbican is such a huge venue, and standing on that stage doing such an important piece of theatre was just amazing. So I'm super proud of that.
Yeah, and so you should be. I haven't. I mean, is there like a filmed version of that? Do you know anywhere?
There is actually. Yes. It's on YouTube.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So if you Google it, I think it was filmed by The Guardian, I think.
Yeah.
So you can go and watch it online.
Excellent. So, I mean, you kind of hinted at it just now. I mean, I know that you've been through some pretty incredible experiences in your life, from you know, from when you first came out, when you became homeless, and then obviously, you know, becoming a well-known actor. So can you expand a little bit on that? What actually happened?
So although I sound like I'm a posh wanker, actually I come from a kind of aspiring working class family. My grandparents were definite Cockneys, and my parents were born on council estates. You know, it's I come from that kind of background, and I think there were just some kind of, as is always the way when communities are deprived, some aspects of it just do not move in terms of their understanding. They were just a little bit backwards in terms of some of their appreciation of where things were moving in terms of sexuality, I think. My parents, I'm talking about. And I grew up really feeling that that being gay was probably the worst thing I could be. I remember my grandma once, I'd gone away during university. I kind of disappeared for a summer, and I basically was in Newquay smoking pot the whole time. When I resurfaced, my grandma was like, where were you? Where'd you go? And and I said, oh, it doesn't matter, Grandma, it's fine, I'm back. And she really pushed me. I said, oh, fine, I was smoking weed in Newquay. And he was like, oh, thank God, I thought you were gay. And so that is a kind of indication of where homosexuality sat within my family, even if they didn't realize it themselves, which I don't think they did. That there were some basic things that were said when I was younger that made me feel that being gay was really the thing that I should avoid at all costs. So then I went to drama school, and I was really on a trajectory of success at that point. I had got first at university. When I left university, I'd been selected to be on the Olivier Awards panel to judge Theatre of the Year, which was just an incredible year's experience. Then I got into drama school on a full scholarship, which I would never have been able to afford to have paid if it hadn't been for that, and was doing really well at school. And then my sexuality kind of hit me in the face because I fell in love with a guy at drama school, and was forced to really confront it. And also at drama school, it's quite a kind of soul-bearing, emotionally volatile experience, particularly Oxford School of Trauma, as affectionately we call it. It was just everything happening at the same time. And it kind of just exploded inside me, and my internal, how I felt about my sexuality was awful when I left drama school. And then I kind of came to my dad and said, oh, how do you feel about me bringing my boyfriend to, he was getting remarried. And so I said, how do you feel about bringing my boyfriend to the wedding? And he said he wouldn't be happy. And I think eventually my relationship with my parents broke down, in large part because of how I felt about myself, but in large part because they weren't able to communicate with me about it either. I felt like a monster, and I kind of expected that I should act like a monster. And so I just kind of didn't feel like I could go home. And then when I did go home, some things were said about keeping my toothbrushes out of reach of other family members because they were given bad advice about the potential that I might contaminate XYZ other people with various things because I was taking drugs. And it was all a really difficult time where my sexuality was so entwined with how I viewed myself that I wasn't able to separate it, and neither were they. My parents were not able to separate that between the fact that I was falling apart and the fact I was taking drugs eventually was a product of how I was feeling. And I needed someone to go, it's okay, actually, being gay is not a problem, and we will support you. And unfortunately, my parents didn't make that decision for whatever reason. And so eventually I relationship broke down to a point where I couldn't go home. And so I spent the next 3 years, kind of milling around, sleeping on sofas, initially on like friends' sofas, but when you're homeless, you become a drain on people, and eventually those friends started to disappear because people had their own lives, right? And it didn't seem to be getting better for me. If anything, I was getting worse. So I lost a lot of my friends. And then eventually I had to start finding other ways to sleep, which was, and you know, it's a privilege in some ways that I look the way that I look and I speak the way that I speak because people want to help me, versus XYZ person who gets onto the tube and is like, please gotta have 50p and looks scraggly or whatever. That unfortunately people ignore that person. And they were no less or more homeless than I was at the time. And I made other sacrifices. So I sacrificed my body basically for a place to stay. Often initially on Grindr, I'd just be like, I'd find somewhere to stay and someone that would agree to have me over, and I would sleep with them for somewhere to stay for the night. Then also I spent a lot of time in saunas, which was the play that I did earlier this year called No Sweat, really explored that. Kind of looked at my story and the fact that I spent, particularly on a Monday in London, it was free to go in. And there was a great place to also do sex work, which kept me fed. So it was all just a kind of spiral, basically, that we got totally out of hand, and government agencies weren't able to help me because it just didn't have the provision. Fundamentally, even though AKT, for example, that's the Albert Kennedy Trust, their upper age limit is 25, and I was 21, 22 when I went to them. And they just said, unfortunately, you know, like, we've had to kind of scale back our provision because we don't have the money, and we need to focus on people of higher risk, which are trans people and people of minorities. And that is obviously so important, but it didn't help me. And so I fell through the cracks, basically. Yeah. So, yeah. And then eventually I got put into a hostel, a homeless hostel, which was an experience, but it was somewhere that at least reliable that I could go back to every day. But as soon as I got a job, that homeless hostel wanted to charge me £210 a week to live there, which meant that I was better off not taking the job at all. So the system is fucked. The system is completely skewed against getting people out of the cycle of homelessness, which is really wrong, actually. And I was very lucky that I had an actress friend of mine who I'd recently met, and she said, actually, I've got a spare room. Come live with me, initially rent-free, and then you can save up enough to go and private rent somewhere. And then we just got on so well that eventually she said, well, just stay and you can pay me rent instead. And then I stayed with her for 4 years. And I credit her as often as I can with kind of transforming my life, because she gave me what the Finnish government have done, right? Which is they've just given they've eradicated homelessness overnight by giving all homeless people somewhere to stay without any questions asked. Like no, they don't have to pay anything. They're just given the room, and the rest of it, they're working out their kind of issues and everything else is that is up for them to deal with, and they probably have some support with that. But if you give somebody somewhere to stay and they don't have to worry about it, that is such a huge thing in homelessness that just gives the opportunity to start getting better. And so it took me a long time to get over that period, and still now, particularly in the current situation, the current climate, there are times when that period of my life comes kind of like appears in front of me, and I'm like, oh wow, I've still got that issue that exists from that time. I'm not totally over this. And that's 5 years down the line. But on the whole, my life now is transformed from then. You know, you would never even think it to talk to me or to speak to me that I'd ever been through that period. But it was a mad and crazy time. Yeah.
I guess the thing is, and it's the same with me, I think, with, you know, the things that I've gone through. It's like you look back and actually you can, in some sense, appreciate what you've been through, because everything that you learned from it is what you've brought to this point.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I know that I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I hadn't gone through all of those things.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you feel the same.
Yeah. And also, like, not only am I grateful for having experienced that, because, you know, gratitude for hard times is a difficult thing to swallow, but I am grateful for that. But also I feel lucky, right? Because I feel that there are so many other people who went through exactly the same thing, who weren't able to get out of it. And I'm feel incredibly lucky about that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing I wanted to talk with you about, really, because I know that you are an incredible advocate for the LGBT community and the issues that they're facing. And as you mentioned just now, you know, right now, there's a lot of people out there that we know are suffering and really struggling with the situation that we're in, particularly with lockdown and the kind of isolation and so on that can bring. What do you believe is the thing that people need in order to make changes in their life? What are the most important things that you...
The fundamentals for an individual you're talking about, for how an individual can make their life better. You know, it's a tough one, because really social security is such a big part of what people need, and without that, fundamentally, we don't have that to a sufficient degree to protect these people. It's very hard. However, there are things that you can do. For me, I found swimming was a really big thing. I told you that I was quite a good swimmer when I was at school. And I kind of lost sight of that in my homeless years. And then once I got into once I was in the homeless hostel, there was a swimming pool not far from me, and I started going again. And that was and also it's quite cheap especially if you're on benefits of some kind. You can get a really reduced rate. And I mean, reduced still, you know, for a homeless person, £20 a month is a lot of money. But it's something that is worthwhile spending the money on, prioritizing the money on, because just the improvement that gave my general well-being was huge. And you just feel so kind of cleansed afterwards, and that was massive, actually, in terms of my recovery too, of allowing myself to feel kind of healthy again, which I hadn't done for so long. And I think on top, that's kind of an independent thing. And then it's kind of working towards putting yourself in situations where you can be with people, where you can connect, particularly as a LGBT person, is that the kind of going to, I mean, not at the moment, but going to bars and going on Grindr and that kind of thing, they're the kind of immediate options that are presented to you as an LGBT person, or a gay person in Grindr's case, or LGBT, on Grindr, that are presented to you. And it's very easy to fall into that trap of them being the only options. And they're joining societies where people meet over a shared issue, shared interest, and the sexual aspect of that, which is so present in bars and on Grindr, is obviously there to some extent, but is secondary to something else. And that is also a really healthy thing that you can do for your own mental health to try and improve how you're feeling about stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned also about this lovely actress that took you in when you were, when you were really struggling, and I think sometimes that we need someone who actually believes in us.
Yes, and that should be the government. Just to throw that in there, that should be the government, and unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I had an interesting conversation the other day. There was a guy turned up at the front door, and he was saying he was from, it was to do with some veterans association, which is a charity, and he was collecting money and trying to get subscriptions from people, because the funding, which used to be in terms of millions, I believe, that they were getting, the government have now cut to 200,000.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
people
like,
that serve this country, right? That's people that have put their neck on the line.
And there's so many charities out there now that have had the same thing happen, and it's just wrong, isn't it? That that the government, who are meant to be looking after its people, are just not, and it's so frustrating. And thank God for people like yourself who, are highlighting those issues and are perhaps in a position where you can do that and get the message out to a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's what I think is really important, actually, is that I don't feel affected really by that anymore. I don't feel I have any, like I say, there's occasional times things pop up, but on the whole, I live a very kind of normal life now, and I don't feel ashamed, and I don't feel any of the things I felt back in the day, with shame being a big part of the journey I went on and coping with that. And so I think it's really important, because it's very easy when you get out of it to just be like, pretend it never existed. And I could do that easily. And I just think that doesn't help fix the problem. People start talking about it a bit more, because I'm not unique. That's the thing, is I don't feel unique. It's like a quarter of all homeless people are LGBT. And that's so disproportionately affecting our community that we need to talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, then it's not going to change.
I was actually talking with a friend of mine recently about those particular figures, and they just could not believe that. And I said, well, no, it's true.
Yeah.
And I said, and it's just so wrong. And with the number of stories that I hear from the point of view of me, doing wellness coaching and life coaching and so on, it's there's a disproportionate number of LGBT community who are out there right now, who are suffering and struggling and really need people's help.
Yeah.
It's just so good to hear, from you that you haven't completely left that behind. You are happy to share where you've come from and actually tell that story. And people might be out there right now and actually watching this, and hopefully they'll get some kind of positive message.
I hope so. If it helps one person, that's what I was saying to you before we started recording, that I wish I'd had someone that I could have seen going through the same thing, because it's such a hidden issue on the whole, is that you just don't believe it's happening to other people. And it absolutely was. Like, now I look back and I see the moments when actually it was quite clear that it was happening to other people, but I just couldn't connect with that. And to have somebody that was kind of sat in front of a thing saying, this is a problem, this happened to me, look what you can do to make it better, or just to, even if you can't, to feel like I wasn't alone, would have been huge. So I hope even if I do that for one person, then that's makes a difference.
That's awesome.
And I think that on that same issue, I think it is getting better. You know, they're okay, the government stuff is not. But as a society, the big thing that our current generation has had to contend with is Section 28, right? Where talking about gayness and being gay was seen as something that was wrong. And the new generation have not had that. So talking about their sexuality, which is so tied into why LGBT people end up homeless, and being able to talk about their sexuality, that is a huge step forward. And I see in the younger generations of that will help in terms of making things better.
Absolutely. I remember when Section 28 was first talked about, and I was actually studying to be a teacher in Canterbury at the time, and
Right.
I went on a march against the whole thing. And but even then I was informed that if I was actually arrested, that it could very quickly curtail my teaching career that I hadn't even started.
Yeah.
But you know, but anyway, I did it anyway because I thought it was
well done. I mean,
I think that's, you know, that's what I tend to do. I'll say things that, you know, maybe people don't want to hear sometimes, and I think, you know, like yourself, these things have to be said. They have to be, you know, the message has to be got out there somehow.
Definitely.
So I mean, as you know, maybe a little bit, that, you know, fitness and health are a real part of my life. And so how do you see the role of nutrition and so on, and exercise as part of a person's well-being? You've kind of alluded to it already, obviously, with the swimming. I know it's really important to you still, isn't it?
It is, definitely. I mean, at the moment, I mean, I really struggled actually during lockdown because I couldn't go. That was huge, and my fitness got a shot during that time, and I was feeling really, really low because I wasn't able to do that. And for me, going on a run just doesn't cut it for whatever reason. I feel I'm a fish, you know, I'm a Cancer. Not that I believe in astrology, but I feel at one with the water, and that's really important to me. So that was tough. And I do think that, you know, those kind of things are so important. And my fitness as a whole is something that I try to kind of focus on. At the moment, I've just got myself a personal trainer, and that is helping get my kind of brain back into life mode after such a traumatic kind of 6-month period, particularly for performers, right? So that is doing a lot in terms of keeping me above board. But yeah, I think the role of well-being and health and nutrition and it's huge. It counts for so much that you don't even realize. When I was in the kind of worst part of my life, I think if I just managed to be to eat a bit better and to be a bit healthier in my life, I would have not realized how big an effect that would have had on my ability to get better. And that was one of the things that my ex-housemate, or ex-landlady, the actress who me and Rebecca, that she often cooked for me, and I had home cooked meals, and I'm actually quite a good cook, and I'd lost sight of that too. I'd stopped being able to cook for myself, and I think all those things. It was because also I lived with her and her son, so I had a very kind of familial environment to live in. All those things wrapped up in one were just so transformative.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm trying to put out there is this whole connection between mind, body, spirit, and if you've got all of those things in balance, then your well-being is going to be at its optimum level. But you know, if any of one of those slip in any way, then, you know, things tend to happen that maybe are not so great. So yeah, as we said, it's all of those things that are really important. So what projects are you currently involved in at the moment that you'd like to share with us today?
Projects. Okay, so first I'll talk about theatrics. and then I'll talk about something else, which is also
Okay, yeah, sure.
So the main project that I'm kind of involved in is a production called Happily Ever Pufter, which is a one-man Disney musical parody by a wonderful actor called Rich Watkins. And that was this year was supposed to be the big year for that. We had an international tour planned and going to Edinburgh, doing the UK tour. And unfortunately, all of that got cancelled because of Corona. And we did perform it last year, and it's had some really good reviews. And earlier this year, we managed to go to Australia and do a 3-week run at the King's Head in London. And the reviews have been really positive. We're actually nominated for an award that we find out this Sunday, and then also another one that we should find out in the not too distant future about as well. It's a brilliant show because it's everything you don't expect it to be. It kind of presents itself as a panto, but actually it's a really, really clever journey through what it means to be gay and the identity of being gay, and also the fact that we as gay people have not had our biggest institutions like Disney turn around and show us that being gay is okay. And that's not okay, that they haven't done that. To kind of expunge gayness from the even fantasy worlds is a problem. And we need to fix that. And so that's what the show is about, really. It goes to a dark place occasionally, and you don't expect it to do that. I think that's what's so awesome about it, is that it's not afraid to be something that you don't expect it to be. And it's got quite a cult following now. And so we managed to bring that back 2 weeks ago. There's a gay pub in South London called the Two Brewers, and they gave us the back room, and we did 2 very socially distanced performance in front of a screen and everything there. And that was just great in the current situation to bring it back and to bring some joy, because the show fundamentally, although I said it has a dark side, it brings joy to people. It's a musical. That was just so delightful to bring that back, at least just for 2 days, and bring joy to people. We are hoping to do that again at Christmas, which is a perfect time for it because of the whole panto vibe. So that is on the cards, and I hope to be able to do more producing and directing, because I think I'm quite good at it.
I noticed on your website there's all these kind of different areas that you're involved in. It's like you're a man of many talents, really, aren't you?
I mean, you have to be these days, really, especially if you're a producer, right? Is that you have to be able to be a marketer, to be a graphic designer, to be a video editor, if you want to make it, unless you have a rich parent or someone else in the business fast track you into that. Sadly, I do not have. So and actually, it's better. I always thought, someone once said to me, if you can, just because you're an actor doesn't mean you can't do other things that you love and get paid for it. And actually, that's the best way to find a job that is flexible enough to do what you want to do, which is the acting. And so graphic design and video, I do show reels for people, and other video editing stuff. That is a really great day job, actually, because you can take it with you. And I've been on film sets sometimes, and when my scene isn't on, I've been doing graphic design work, which is just perfect. So
it all fits in.
Really does.
Yeah, I mean, also relating to that, I mean, the thing that I've noticed is that there's that potential with the roles that you've done that you could be typecast, but you really haven't been, have you?
I mean, no, yes and no. What makes you say that?
Well, I mean, you've done a whole variety of like stage stuff. Because I mean, you've done some Shakespeare and things like that. It's like you're not. Yes, you've done a lot of LGBT stuff.
Yes,
but there's so much else, and I think it's just great that you haven't been put into a pigeonhole, if you like.
I try to avoid that, really. I think it's almost impossible to avoid it totally when you're making it as a performer, and because as especially early, like again, this is getting better, but as an LGBT actor, the opportunities are more limited, unfortunately. There is definitely an issue with that. of people not casting LGBT actors because they think that they should own, they can't do it for whatever reason. I don't know what the kind of logic behind it is, but I was very keen on doing work that I felt was important on an LGBT level, but also I wanted to do stuff that I think that I'm good at, and I've always been really good at Shakespeare. I can speak the language really well, and I loved it at school and university. I was really kind of into Shakespeare and classical theatre and Greek classic theatre, for example. I'd love to do a Greek show at some point, and that's really my bread and butter. So yeah, I try, and that's the thing at the moment is post Grass is Always Grindr. What I would really like my next acting job to be is something totally different, where I get to play a really exciting, gritty part in a TV drama of some kind. That is what I want to do, and I'm hoping that that the industry can be open enough to have me, because I feel proud of myself for being kind of championing my story and being upfront about being LGBT, rather than waiting for my uber success and then being like, oh, by the way, I'm gay. You know, that is not what.
Oh, do people do that then?
Philip Schofield, anyone?
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. So I know for a fact that after hearing your story, people are going to want to be following you and finding out more about what you're up to. So what's the best way for them to do that?
Social channels, at DENHOLM SPURR on all of them. That's the joy of having such a unique name. DENHOLM spelled DENHOLM, and SPURR with 2 R's. Yeah, so that's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
All of the platforms.
Yeah. Not TikTok. I refuse to join anymore. I'm done.
Yeah, I don't do TikTok either. So Darren, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure finding out more about you, and you know what your philosophy is, and you know all of the things that you have, you know, you've gone out there and helped with and been very vocal about, particularly for the LGBT community. And I know that everyone, you know, hopefully will have taken something from it. But if there's one message that that you would hope that people would take away from our chat today, what would it be?
Oh. You know, I think that just shame is so shit. Shame is shit, and we should not shame ourselves or other people. And if you can find a way to avoid doing that, particularly to yourself, to love yourself is just such an important thing.
Yeah, I mentioned to someone the other day, again, kind of coaching them away from that whole idea that they didn't feel worthy, they didn't, you know, that there were things in their life that they were ashamed of. And I said, you know what, one of the things that I was taught to do was to stand in front of a mirror completely naked and say, I love you. And, you know, and I've recommended that to a few people, and it's so weird because when they feed back to you afterwards, some of them will say, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
Because they don't, fundamentally.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that we do tend to put ourselves down, whereas we should be building ourselves up, because what the RuPaul says? You know?
How are you going to love yourself? How are you going to love, what is it? I can't even say it now.
So if you can't love yourself,
that's it.
How the heck are you going to love anyone else?
For real.
So, and it's so true, you know, you do have to think of yourself first, and not in a selfish way, but you do have to, you know, make sure that things are good with you, and then that obviously can have a knock-on effect.
And also treat yourself like, you gotta think, if you think of yourself as somebody else, right? And would you treat somebody else in the way that you're treating yourself? And if the answer is no, then stop it. Don't do it.
Yeah. I had a real struggle with self-talk.
Right.
You know, that kind of internal chatter that, you know, says you're not good enough, you can't do this, you can't do that, and and I really had to put a lot of work into that.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of aware when I'm actually doing it, and then I stop it. You know, it's like reframe the sentence.
It's okay to still have the feeling, right? But then to recognize it and be like, the same with jealousy. I have the same thing. It's okay to feel jealous, but how you act on it is different. It's still within your power. And I think that we have it in our power to stop shaming ourselves, and so we should try.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Denham, thank you once again.
You're welcome.
If everyone who's been watching this has enjoyed the last, how long has it been? About 40 minutes. Perhaps you'd like to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Details below this video. There'll be lots of other people coming on to tell their story, hopefully with the same kind of inspiration that Denham has given us today. And if you have a story that you want to tell, then, you know, do please get in touch. Remember also that we have our like-minded community on Facebook of people that really want to become their best selves, and that is HW Total Wellness Online. So go and look that up on Facebook. You will be welcome with open arms to that as well. So Denham, what's the plan for the rest of the day?
I'm testing my board game, the newest version. How exciting. So yeah, friends coming round in 10 minutes and we're going to do that. So.
Excellent. Okay. Right, I'm going to stop record now. If I can bring that up.
Bye.